Like our content? It's funded by viewers like you. Please consider becoming a sustaining supporter of New Church Live today.
So friends, good morning. Pastor Chuck Blair here. Great to have you joining us today. And whether you're here as part of our small studio audience or whether you're joining us from wherever that might be, it is wonderful to have you here today. Now, I'm a little more dressy than I normally am. I'm headed out to a baptism up in Allentown right after this. And again, it's just a wonderful thing to celebrate. You know, these people who are continuing to move forward with their families and figuring out ways to keep things recognizably first. So wonderful to have you here. And today is a fun service to preach, and it's a fun service to think about. Because one of the biggest gifts God gives us is freedom. We have all kinds of freedom. Now, oftentimes that freedom, we think freedom is we get to choose every single one of life's circumstances. And that's not true. There are some things we can choose, and there's some things we cannot choose. But God always gives us this kind of freedom, narrative freedom. The freedom that we get to look at our lives and we get to decide the meaning. We get to decide what kind of spin we're going to put on the narrative of our lives. And it's remarkable to me to hear people, to talk to people who have this narrative that's so incredibly upbeat. Last week, meeting with a parishioner, and it's sort of coming towards the end of the journey, and talking to her and saying, well, what do you sort of see life as at this point in time in your life? And, what's it look like as you're coming towards the end of things? And she just used one word. She just went, wow, with this big smile. And that's choosing a certain narrative. That's choosing a way to see life. That's choosing a way to see the world. And that doesn't mean, friends, that it's always the narrative we choose when life is at its best. In a way, our lives are most defined not in terms of how we handle the best days, though that's important, but really how do we handle the worst days? And we've all had them. It was interesting getting ready for this sermon, and these things take a long time to put together, but the little glimpses you get of narrative freedom and how people can make decisions in hard places really is fascinating. One of the questions I loved was this basic one. Tell me the story of your last drink. Reading an article on 12-step programs and people who struggle with alcohol addiction, and they put this question out there, tell me the story of your last drink. And it was interesting because they did the research, and the beautiful part is that research will back up a lot of the time, 99% of the time, what spirituality teaches us. And what they found was this: the people who answered this question and they made it an answer and the story was redemptive had a much easier time keeping their sobriety. In other words, they had this addiction. And the story of their last drink didn't become a story of like, oh, this is so hard, this is so terrible. It became a story that last drink was the beginning, was the start of their life. And it's colored by some really hard things. We're going to take more of a look at that next week. Because we get to see these redemption stories over and over and over again. Our congregation's very involved down in Philadelphia in a variety of roles. One is with St. Francis Inn down in the Kensington section of Philadelphia, a wonderful place to volunteer. And, talking with a parishioner, and they had on a piece of St. Francis swag on, and they're walking around over in New Jersey, and somebody comes up to them, and they used to come there for meals. And if you're coming there for meals at St. Francis Inn, you're really struggling. You're really having a hard time. And they talked about that, and then they talked about what their life has been since. Friends, today, the hope is pretty simple. That we go out of here and we're able to really choose, like, what is the story you are going to tell about your life? And let's sort of step back so we're not caught in the old fish swimming in the water, wondering what's water because they're swimming in it. Let's step back a little bit so we can really see this and really try to find that redemption story that's going to help us to write a better story. as we launch this new series. So friends, I want to welcome you, welcome all of you. Welcome to New Church Live.
First things first, I'ma say all the words inside my head. I'm fired up, tired of the way that things have been. Oh, ooh. Second things second, don't you tell me what you think that I could be. I'm the one at the sail, I'm the master of my sea. Oh, broken from a young age, taking myself into the masses, writing my poems for the few that look at me, took to me, shook at me, feeling me, singing from the pain, taking my message from the veins, speaking my lessons from the brain, singing the beauty through the pain. Make me a believer, believer. Pain, break me down, you build me up, believer, believer. Choking in the crowd, building my rain up in the cloud, falling like ashes to the ground, hoping my feelings wouldn't drown, but they never did, ever live, living and flowing, inhibited, limited, till it broke up and it rained down like
Good stuff. Thank you, guys. That was great. So again, today we're looking at stories, and we can really have fun with this because once we get that we can tell the story, I mean, there's so much freedom in that. Because I see people all the time shackled by their stories. They'll just tell you all the woes and all the reasons why they can't do this and they can't do that and this won't work and that won't work. It gets a little boring. So let's embrace stories that actually open up our lives. And that's not saying that lives are easy. Lives are not easy. Lives are heartbreakingly hard, a large percentage of the time. And despite all that, can we find this sort of transcendent truth about telling better stories in our lives. Now let's back up. Let's just talk about what a couple of possible ways to hold stories might be. And if you look at this graphic, you can look at stories, and a lot of religions can get into this, a contamination story or a redemption story. The contamination story stands in a certain place. And it says like there is this perfection out there, and people inhabit that perfection, usually a chosen few inhabit that. And anything that impinges on that is somehow a contaminant. What does that mean? Well, it means it's a place of, a contaminant would be a place where a lot of shame is showing up, where a lot of hopelessness is showing up. And the number 3 one there is probably the most important. It's grounded on this belief in permanent flaws. Now that is easy to say, get over that, don't do that. That's really hard for us to remember. No one is permanently, forever flawed. They just aren't. Can people make mistakes? Can they really hurt other people? Can they have a struggle that's going to last maybe this entire natural life? Absolutely. But that doesn't change that love wins. It just means it might take a little longer. And that's why we need to just shift that story a little bit over into the redemption story. The redemption story is a place of grace. It's a place of incredible freedom and a place of opportunity for growth. See, a contamination story, we put ourselves and we put other people kind of in this box. But a redemption story is able to look at the problems. I'm going to use this phrase a lot today. It's able to look at the challenges and go, yes, fill in the blank, challenges, and ... And when we can have that yes and, what happens is that the story bumps out. It bumps out into this thing that is redemptive. Jesus did that over and over and over again. He's constantly not only telling redemption stories, but living redemption stories again and again and again. And I want to share with you a couple of those stories today to really try to make this point, because I think it is such a beautiful point and there's so much to it. The first is looking at a contamination part. Now, contamination stories, again, it's that belief in permanent flaws and shame and guilt and all these things. And a contamination story, a lot of the Old Testament was warning against contaminants, things that could contaminate our lives. Now, is there a point where we need to be aware of things that can contaminate our lives? Well, obviously yes, but we don't want to live there, and we don't want to make that the point of the journey. It's a step, but hopefully we can keep on moving beyond it. Now, here's a contamination story. This is from Leviticus 13. What they're talking about here is somebody with leprosy, a skin disease that was a contagion. People were worried about it spreading. So this is, if you had it, this is what happened. Anyone with such a defiling disease must wear torn clothes, let their hair be unkempt, cover the lower part of their face, and cry out, unclean, unclean. As long as they have the disease, they remain unclean. They must live alone. They must live outside the camp. You just, like, this is traumatic. If you had this disease, you couldn't be around other people. You had to move away from society, cover your face, and you had to go around shouting, unclean, unclean. There's something horrific about that. Like that idea of contamination. Now, obviously, health concerns, blah, blah, blah. I get all that. But just think, friends, with that, how much we can do that spiritually to other people. It's easy to look at that in the Old Testament and be like, oh, I can't believe they do that. But probably most of us have at least one or more people in our lives who we have done that to. We really believe that they have made the permanent mistake, that there is no redemption, and their job is to constantly be owning up to it, unclean, unclean, constantly be covering their face, constantly be alone, shunned, pushed to the outside. If we are shunning other people, we're probably missing the Christian message. Is there time for appropriate distance? Absolutely. Is there time where we have to sort of take a time out that may last years, may last decades? Absolutely. But that's very different from shunning. Because there's no wishing well in shunning. Jesus came to the earth, simple proclamation, peace on earth, goodwill to humanity. There is zero goodwill when we shun others. And so what Jesus does is Jesus does these things that we kind of miss. They're miracles in a way, and they're miracles because he lives a very different message. He lives this yes and message. He lives this message that is all about redemption. Here's the redemption part of it. This comes up in Matthew. A man with leprosy, again, leprosy, you saw what the man was supposed to do, but this is what happened. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him, Jesus, and said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Jesus reached out his hand, touched the man. I am willing, he said. Be clean. Immediately he was cleansed of his leprosy. It's such an incredible, beautiful story. Because here's Jesus, and again, it gets lost. It just gets lost because we read through these things really quickly. Just that simple phrase that's highlighted there, touch the man. Just the simple fact that Jesus touched him. At that particular time, that would have meant for many people that Jesus was then ritualistically unclean. But that wasn't the Christian message. The Christian message was not about contaminants. It was about yes and. It was about redemption. It was about a God who literally was going to join us in this life, a God in the flesh and blood, God in flesh and blood, God with skin on, who touches people. And notice the difference. It's not an isolating, it's a healing. It's not an isolating, it's a healing. Just think of the shift here from shame, hopelessness, belief in permanent flaws, to grace, opportunity to grow, and freedom. One story, a story of contamination, is a very closed story. A story of redemption is a very open story. That's why I think curious people make such a difference in the world, because no stories are ever closed. We're never trying to write someone else's final chapter, because we have the humility to know that we don't know, and that God's love and God's grace is such that we don't know the way that story ends. And it's not even like a hand-wringing, we don't know. It's just, we don't know. Let's see what God does with this. One of the parts, friends, that I think is real important with the redemption story is this. Redemption story, it's not where the facts change, but where the narrative does. And that's so much part of writing a better story, and I think we need to come back to that again and again. I think so much of the time we do a disservice to faith and to God if we think that somehow the spiritual life will mean the events of our life will be different. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. I would argue most of the time it's pretty much the same, whether you're spiritual or not. You're going to have amazing days filled with blessings beyond what you can think of, and you're going to have days that are so heartbreaking, you don't even want to know about them ahead of time because they're so bad. And many of you have lived through those things. That up and that down. And so much of this approach is saying, well, we're not going to change the facts, but we're going to change the narrative. And it's not sort of a Pollyannish narrative. It's a narrative that's based on this. It's based on the practice of grace. It's based on the practice of grace. New Church Live, we're very fortunate. We get to travel places and preach in different places. We got to travel over the pond when we were on vacation this summer, got to preach over there, got to meet some New Church Live folks, which was wonderful, over in London. And as well, some people were part of Michael Church over there. Great occasion. And what was interesting was someone pulled me aside for a little conversation afterwards, and they were mentioning they'd been raised in an Anglican church in England. And they were talking about how the Anglican church in England had this beautiful connection, this beautiful definition of grace. And it's easy for us to think of God's grace as sort of God's loving mercy sort of flowing out there. And that is a beautiful way to put it. But the Anglican church, friends, listen to this. They had this little different twist. I just loved it. I just thought, oh, theologically, that's really good. Grace in the Anglican tradition, at least according to this person who'd been raised in that tradition, was this tiny little moment. Here you had event. Here you had your response. Grace was that little moment in between. And what I think is powerful about that, if we think of grace, again, as God's loving mercy kind of pouring through us, I think that'd probably be more of an American definition and sort of a salvific thing to it. If you think about it, that means that this little moment of tender care, this little moment between event and response, that's where I work out the idea of God's salvation. Just this little moment that I get to choose. I get to choose to write a better story or not. I can fill that moment with my compulsions, my fears, my knee-jerk response. I can have such a dire story, such a negative story that it instantly writes that moment a certain way. And here's the trick, friends. I think for a lot of us, when we're coming from that place of our compulsions, our fears, those compulsions and fears, they write a story so quickly that we don't even take the time to realize that it's written the story already when we're on to like beyond. You know, here's the event, here's the reaction. We're already into the reaction, and our fears, worries, anxieties, they've written it in like 2 seconds. I mean, how many of you have catastrophized that way? Maybe you just started school and I don't know, something, I'm thinking we have a lot of young adults who are in college or high school, wherever, you know, watching online and you went to your college class and something happened and all of a sudden like, phew, you know, your brain is out, that's it. Everybody's going to know it's the end of life as I know it. I'm going to have no more friends. Might as well just go home and live alone the rest of my life. We can do that. Fear writes a story very quickly. And I think love asks us just to slow down a minute, to look at this, to consider, to maybe think there's a different way of doing this. And the whole point of this life, the whole point of why God put us here was so that we could change our mind. Literally, that's what repentance means. So we could change our mind so we could start to see things differently. Now let's take another example. Another beautiful story from the Bible. This story is an Easter story. It's one I love preaching on. I mean, if I had like a last sermon to do, I probably would do it on this particular story because it's so powerful. It's another story of contamination and redemption. Shifting of stories. So this story going to Easter, as many of you know, Jesus is on trial. One of his prime disciples by the name of Peter, who's followed him around, and Peter is sitting outside around a coal fire. And Jesus is in a trial. It's obvious, these are the Romans, it's obvious the way this trial is going to go. And figuratively, this was a bad neighborhood for him to be in. People would have known he was a follower of Jesus. Jesus is being tried for a capital offense. The Romans, everybody knew the way that was going to go. And here's Peter sitting around this fire. And he gets asked this question. Do you know him? And he gets asked it 3 times around this coal fire. And Jesus had already warned him. He said, look, you're going to deny me 3 times And guess what Peter did? Denied him 3 times. No, I don't know who this guy is. It's a contamination story again. And there's so many levels here of, you could look at it from Peter's point of view. Peter's like, I don't want to be contaminated. Don't confuse me with that guy. And also just the whole idea that Jesus was being killed because Jesus was thought to be a contaminant. As if love could contaminate things. But humans can create structures where that's true. And then Easter happens. Jesus is crucified, resurrected. So you have that part of the story. Jesus, these people around a coal fire. Do you know him? And then we shift into this incredibly beautiful story. I think arguably the most beautiful story in the Bible. Here's that story. The context of it was this. Jesus has been resurrected, and he's sitting on a beach, and the disciples are out in a boat. And Peter sees him. Now just imagine all the emotions to that. Here you had seen him die. You were sure he was gone. You were sure there was no redemption story at all. There was no yes, ... and there was none of that. The story had reached its final chapter, and the final chapter was catastrophe. Sheer catastrophe. And then Peter sees the Lord. And that's where we pick up this story. Peter jumps into the water, swims to Jesus. While he's there sitting with Jesus, Jesus starts to talk to him. Other disciples are now gathered around. They're eating fish. When they had finished eating, Jesus said, Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. Now, this is just a little aside. It's a little humorous aside. Many of you know this, but I want to point it out. Please don't ever rob Jesus of a sense of humor. This whole thing of, do you love me more than these? He's not talking about the disciples. He's talking about the fish. He's saying, do you love me more than fish, these fried fish? And I imagine with a smile, Peter goes, yes, you know I love you. Jesus says, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus asks, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. A third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time. Notice, third time. 3. And guess what else? These fish, this gathering is taking place around a coal fire. Only time a coal fire shows up in the Bible are these 2 stories. Asked 3 times, both times. Do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. There's such incredible wisdom and love in this. And let's just pull it apart just a little bit. And I think we can see it pretty clearly. First off, here's Jesus. And if you notice, friends, like what's so important is just to remember, right, that what's in the Bible is important and what's not in the Bible is important. What we don't read is sometimes every bit as important as what we do. What we don't read is Jesus going like, dude, we got a few things to talk about. What about that denial stuff you were pulling off a couple days ago? There's none of it. Jesus doesn't bring it up at all. What does Jesus do? He goes right into, do you love me? Not did you know me? Did you love me? And that word love there, it's such a unique word. It's a very purposefully used word. It's the word agape. The word agape love, which is a love that is self-giving. It's not a romantic love. It's not the love that friends share. All these other tons of Greek words around love. No, it's a very specific Greek word that's about agape, which is about this self-giving. Do you love me? So Jesus is saying, like, do you love me? He said, can you give? Can you give? Peter says, yes. And then he says, feed my sheep, feed my lambs. Beautiful, beautiful story. I think, friends, we can see, right? We can see a contamination story just even within in the New Testament narrative around Easter. Jesus constantly working to make that a redemption story. And it's not that, we choose all this. It's life is a redemption story. I want to say that really strongly. Life is a redemption story. It's not a contamination story. Jesus is constantly pulling those things out. He leaves no one behind. He doesn't have any groups that even the Pharisees, when you look at that, even those groups, he has these moments where he's reaching back across to pull people into a redemption story. And that's what we want to live. That's where we want to move. And when we come back after this song, I want to talk about, what does life really look like? When we choose not just to have the theory of redemption stories, but to turn redemption stories into our lived realities in this life. We're going to chat again after this next song.
To the planet, welcome to existence. Everyone's here, everyone's here, everybody's watching you now. Everybody waits for you. Next, I dare you to move, dare you to move, dare you to lift yourself up off the floor. I dare you to move, I dare you to move like day never happened, day never happened before.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. So again, looking at this story and the whole the yes and of it, it's interesting, right? Like, what does it look like to take this idea of a redemption story and like, friends, like, really think, what's the lived experience of this? How can we really live it? Well, I think, again, coming back to what I said about those moments of grace, it's like really looking at that moment of grace and really thinking, how do I pour right into that? How do I allow God to pour through me right into that so that I'm free, so that I can make a choice? I think there's so much there, and I definitely, as a pastor and just seeing that over and over again is people have so much power when they do that. And it doesn't mean, again, friends, that it changes life circumstances. And it certainly doesn't mean that you're not going to grieve anymore. I mean, that's one of the worst things somebody can tell you is you're not going to grieve. No, of course you're going to grieve. Of course you're going to miss. Of course you're going to have moments of despair. But can you even put all that into that moment of grace and remind yourself, sometimes with tears, that this is all a redemption story? It is all a redemption story. That's why you're here. That's why love wins. That's why there's this thing called divine providence. That's why Jesus went through this life that he went through. And that's why Jesus gives us a path to walk. And that path is this redemption story. It is this yes and story. And it's so fascinating, right? Hearing other people when they discover these different pieces. We had this beautiful book called Finding Chica by Mitch Albom. Wonderful book, had a great small group on it. I mentioned it a couple weeks ago. Really, really enjoyed the group and the book. And he also wrote a book called Tuesdays with Maury. And Maury Schwartz was this professor that he had at Brandeis University. And Maury got pancreatic cancer, and he got interviewed from Ted Koppel. Now, probably only those my age and older will remember that name. But Ted Koppel interviewed him. And what Mitch Albom decided to do was to sit down with, or to have these discussions with him about life and how life was going to work and what do you do when you come to the end, because Maury had pancreatic cancer, which meant he wasn't going to last real long. And Maury had this beautiful part, and again, it just is a redemption story. Again, it's the power when we share redemption stories. And Maury talked about the way he saw life, and he saw life. He said, "Yeah, you think of life, and you think of waves. And here's this wave, and it's the she wave, and she's all worried because she sees the shore, and she sees these waves crashing on the shore, and she's all anxious because she sees the end. And then you have this nice guy wave, and he sees how nervous she is over there, and she asks why she's all nervous. She said, "Well, I can see the shore. I can see we're going to crash on the shore." And he's like, no. All that's going to happen is you're going to become part of the ocean. You're never not part of the ocean. That's a beautiful redemption story. That's a way to see life as this beautiful ongoing thing. And I think that's so true of heaven. It's like heaven. We get to choose to live heaven now. We get to choose to live a redemption story now. Again, won't change any of the facts of our life, but it certainly is going to change the experience of our life. Heaven all the way to heaven. The beauty of that, friends, is that it reminds us that God is writing a redemption story right now in all of our lives. This is from the book Secrets of Heaven, 2878. The Lord guides each person in a unique way, tailored to their individual character, both innate and shaped by experience. It's the nature-nurture thing, a little bit of both. The timing and circumstances of this guidance are known only to him, as he alone orchestrates and directs them in harmony with each person's mindset and way of life. It's this beautiful idea that there's this universal divine providence that is guiding our lives. And the beauty of God is God has this thing called universal love, and it's very particular to each one of us. Each one of us has a unique story, but it's all within this context of universal love. And then we get to see how that works. We get to celebrate that. We get to live the idea that we are a part of a redemption story. Where do you need reminded of that? What part of your life needs to hear that? What relationship might be healed just a smidge by remembering that? Because if the Lord is writing your redemption story, he's writing all of our redemption stories. And think about how that works, and think about what that can be, and think of that how that is for yourself. And let's have a week just filled with that kind of grace, that kind of little spot where we can write a better story. We can see contamination stories when they show up, and we can keep on reminding ourselves, making it a lived experience, that I'm not going to live that story. I'm going to live the redemption story, because the redemption story is what's true. So friends, have a good week writing a better story. Amen. What we're going to do now is we're going to close the service. And as we always do here at New Church Live, we come in for a soft landing. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little prayer, the Our Father prayer, and a blessing. And then, again, wishing you folks all the very best as we go into our last song. So please join me in prayer. Lord, please help to remind us again of the power of life lived within the context of a redemption story. You lived it, Lord. And as your command often says, fear not and follow me. Fear not and follow me. Help us to follow in your footsteps, Lord. Help us to remember the redemption story. Help us to think, Lord, where do we need to see that in ourselves? Where do we need to tell ourselves a redemption story about the parts of our life that feel somehow off, somehow misguided, somehow lost, somehow guilty, somehow filled with shame? Those areas, Lord, where we have made mistakes, where we've stepped off the path, where we've hurt others and hurt you. Help us, Lord, to remember redemption story there. And Lord, also, very importantly, remind us that everyone else is a redemption story too. Everyone else has a redemption story too. Help us, Lord, in our lives where we see that redemption story, to see it in others, and to remember, Lord, that there's no fatal flaw. The story in your grace, in your heaven, is never over. It's never the end. Every ending is just a beginning to something new, closer to you, closer to others, closer to home, closer to heaven. Lord, help us this week write a better story. Our prayer. Our Father, who art in the heavens, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as in heaven, so upon the earth. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you, bring you peace, and bring you home. Amen. Have a wonderful week, friends.
Die today, saw the face of God and love. Would you change? Would you change? If you knew that love could break your heart, you're down so low, cannot fall. Would you change? Would you change? How bad, how good does it need to get? How many losses, how much regret? What chain reaction would cause an effect? Makes you turn around, makes you try to explain, makes you forgive and forget, makes you change.
Have a great week, everybody. See you next week. Thank you for watching.